Ms. Crowder. Okay, as Ms. Crowder is coming, Cindy Hamilton will be the next speaker. Is Cindy Hamilton here? Okay, she's already on the front row. Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Crowder.
Thank you. My name is Carla Crowder. I'm Executive Director at Alabama Appleseed. I'm also a lawyer. We represent incarcerated people. We correspond with hundreds of incarcerated people, and I have visited most every prison in the state in the last decade. Appleseed provides research and policy advocacy on tough issues. I think we can all agree what's happening in our prisons qualifies, so I want to thank you first for your service on this committee. We have recently documented that mortality in ADOC is 5 times the national average. I will be providing documentation of mortality, assaults, staff assaults, in email correspondence that was recommended. I'd like to talk specifically about one of those deaths, Daniel Terry Williams, whose death has been reported across the national media and in 4 continents. This was a preventable death. He was beaten in October at Staten and died in November. It was not overcrowding or buildings or low staff that created the culture of violence and incompetence that led to Mr. Williams' death. I want to tell you what led to his death. The 38-year-old suspect in this kidnapping, rape, and torture was involved in 9 instances of sex assault, rape, and stabbing since 2017 in DOC while incarcerated. There is no documentation that he was placed in segregation for any of these assaults. There was no disciplinary action by ADOC. His classification summary showed a 5-year clear record of institutional violence, which resulted in a perfect score of 0 in risk assessment conducted in October of this year, and a total score low enough for him to be placed in medium security in an open bay dorm. The psych associates signed off on this and the warden signed off on this. 9 days later, 22-year-old Daniel Williams, who was scheduled to be released to his family within days, was found, according to ADOC, quote, unresponsive on this inmate's assigned bed. It appears that victim had been assaulted. Mr. Williams later died, and the Staten warden told the family he overdosed. This assailant was suspected but never charged, never disciplined, and not housed in segregation, even though 9 reports of sex assault are on his record. It happened at Donaldson, Fountain, Limestone, Bibb, and Bullock. I will be emailing committee members a detailed report and supporting evidence of what happened here. It's hard to even begin to suggest remedies sufficient to correct this kind of unconscionable neglect and incompetence. At a minimum, it appears that additional oversight of ADOC is warranted. Appleseed is working with national experts on an oversight bill to be introduced next session. We are here, sir. We are here to suggest reasonable, pragmatic, bipartisan responses. I hope you will consider the oversight bill, and I hope you also will consider visiting the prisons. There is provision in DOC policies for unannounced legislative visits at prisons. I would encourage you all to do so. This death could have been prevented. You can prevent hundreds more. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Crowder. Okay, Ms. Cindy Hamilton, and then the next speaker will be Pam Moser. Is Pam Moser here? Okay. All right, Ms. Hamilton.
There's no way I can follow that, but I will say my son has been mentally and physically tortured for 4 years. And in January of this year, corrupt officers, they are corrupt. They're on the news, hiding their identity, admitting they're all corrupt. We're given the authority to punish and take good time away. My son is not he has no violent charges, and he was going to EOS in April, which is just 4 months away. All of his good time it was taken for, I'll tell you, phone violations. One was because he borrowed another inmate's PIN number. I have his story, and I'm going to give you guys a copy, and I think I emailed y'all all a copy too. But 700, and this was like 6 weeks after the executive order was signed. Do y'all know how many inmates good time have been taken since then? Because it's a lot. That's also contributing to the numbers. And now his date says February of 2035. And it took less than 72 hours for his custody level to change. But then you have other ATLs. They never get changed. It's all wrong. Y'all, these are our sons on these videos and these pictures. They're our sons. They're our brothers, our fathers, our uncles, our neighbors. They're our family, our husbands. There's husbands in there, and not all of them have killed someone. It's not right. You're not protecting them, and there's no medical care. None. Did y'all see there's 94 positions open for yes care throughout Alabama? Have y'all seen that? So it's not okay. Two wrongs do not make a right, and what the state is allowing to happen is it's animalistic, and it's our family. This is my son. And it's not just him. There's a lot of these guys struggled with addiction. That's what led them to prison. So when putting an addict into an environment where there's copious amounts of drugs, it's never going to be, and there's no way to get away from it. Even if they wanted to, they can't. And this is not normal drugs. This is a new drug, fentanyl. It's never going to work out. It's not okay. It's just not okay. Where's the rehabilitation? We have to have that.
Ms. Hamilton, your time has expired. Thank you so much for being here today and addressing this. Representative England. Sure.
Ma'am, if you could come back for a second.
Ms. Hamilton.
Ms. Hamilton?
Ms. Hamilton. Representative England would like to ask you a question.
Okay.
Just stay there at the mic.
Have you reported any of this to anybody at Department of Corrections?
They don't care. Yes. They don't care. My son was assaulted in Limestone last July, and it took 6 days to get him out of general population. They don't care.
And I'm not going to ask you to identify him or anything like that, but I just wanted to make sure that. And
they don't care.
If you're coming to.
They know. They don't care.
And I just wanted, if you're coming to kind of anybody, and Mr. Chair, I just wanted, in your narrative, could you make sure to tell us if you've notified Department of Corrections of what's going on, so we can have a good idea of what if something that we need to talk about?
I made you all a copy.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Representative Simpson.
Ms. Hamilton, I do want to say I did receive your email.
Okay.
Thank you very much for sending this information to us, and I think that's part of our role in this job is to hear from victims, not only in this meeting setting, but as you have stories that go through. So I do want you to understand that your email was received and it was read, so thank you for.
I didn't even want to make today about my son because I realized really fast it's about all of our sons. And it's not just my son. And it's not okay. Like, y'all don't understand. Like, and then when we first got here, you said, there's nothing you can do about it, da-da-da. Okay, well, then that's the person I need to talk, because it needs to be fixed, like, right now, today. Like, right now, yesterday. They're killing them. They're torturing them. It's not okay. It's just not okay. It's not okay. They have to fix it. And I actually attended the first meeting. I don't know if you guys remember, up on the top. And I didn't know, but Commissioner Ham, I was really expecting him to be here because I have some questions for him because he lied. You outright asked him, are we housing them as with like classifications, crimes, whatever, and he told you yes, but that's a lie. Not only that, classifications it needs to be completely restructured because according to, like my son, he literally could go to a level 5 prison right now. Right now. And there's not a violent bone in his body.
Ms. Hamilton, before you leave, if you will notice there on the podium, there are contact for victim notification issues.
Okay.
If you will take that and use that, those contacts as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator
before you leave,
Singleton.
I'd like to ask a question. Will you please come back to
Ms. Hamilton?
Ms. Hamilton? You talked about the good time that was taken away,
Yes.
and he was going to be up for parole in what year?
No, it's not parole.
I mean,
He would have EOS'd. He was on
EOS, I'm
15
sorry.
straight. He would EOS, 4 years in April. He was supposed to come home in this coming April, which he has no violent crimes. He could have already been out. He could be out now with the monitoring. But now it is February of 2035.
So EOS would have been 2024.
April of 2024.
Now we're talking about
February of 2035.
Thank you. That's why I want to get some clarification. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Now we have Ms. Moser, and the next one on the list is Lauren Ferrano. Is Lauren? Okay, Lauren's here. Okay. Okay, Ms. Moser.
My name is Pam Moser. I am from Birmingham, Alabama. I am a nurse. My son, Brian, died at Staten Infirmary on October the 4th, 2023. He was 46 years old. Around puberty, Brian began to suffer with depression and later diagnosed with bipolar disorder. It was during this time he began abusing substances. Brian's father and I went for visitation at Bullock on August the 19th, 2023, as we did every month. Brian had called a few days earlier and said he had been hurt. The left side of Brian's face was swollen and discolored. He had an open stab wound on his left calf, which was red and swollen. I counted 5 lacerations on his head. I asked the CO if he knew anything about Brian's injury. He said, Brian tends to provoke people. I had to send him back to change his pants because they had blood all over them. 4 days later, long enough for sepsis to set in, Brian was finally hospitalized with a skull fracture, facial fracture, rib fractures, a stab wound, and teeth knocked out. Warden Lamar said no report had been filed and stated, I don't know how we let Brian get by us. Brian was hospitalized again on September 13th. On September 23rd, the hospital physician requested the family come see Brian as he wasn't doing well. As Brian did not want resuscitative measures performed, he was put on comfort care. Warden Baber stopped our visitation, stating that Brian is doing better. He was placed on comfort care. I explained to her that meant they were withdrawing aggressive treatment, that he was dying. Warden Baber said, we're all dying. We were not allowed to see Brian the last 7 days of his life. We called daily to tell him we loved him and were trying to get a visit. We don't know if he got any of those messages, and if he did, was there any response? When Warden Calloway called to tell me my son had died, I asked if I could talk to anyone that was with him the last few hours of his life, but was denied that request. Hundreds of families in Alabama are suffering like this because of the state's failure to correct its flawed prison system. When one breaks the law, they lose their freedom, not their rights as human beings. My calling as a nurse was hospice care. ADOC took away the chance for me to be with my son during his last days and hours. How is it justified not to be allowed to be with your child as he takes his last breaths? This is what I believe. Gangs control Alabama prisons and sell drugs to the incarcerated addicts that are in the throes of their addiction. They must get those drugs from staff members because visitors and mail are checked. Therefore, those staff members must look the other way when gangs exact their vengeance on those unable to pay until they are beaten senseless. Therefore, no report is filed. Thank you for listening to me, and I will also email another version.
Thank you, Ms. Moser. And I would like to state that I, too, have received a lot of those emails. I've read every single one. We'll continue to read and look over those, in addition to whatever else is sent. So thank you. Okay, Ms. Farino. And the next speaker will be Kevin Hyatt. Is Kevin Hyatt? Okay. All right. Ms. Farino, am I saying that?
You are, yes. Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Fareno, and I am counsel in a case that was filed yesterday on behalf of currently and formerly incarcerated individuals, 2 labor unions, and the Woods Foundation. The lawsuit challenges forced labor practices and the unconstitutional and racist operation of the Alabama Parole Board. We hear phrases like modern-day slavery and the new Jim Crow all the time, but let's talk about what that means on the ground here in our home state of Alabama. Over 90% of parole-eligible applicants are denied. For individuals who are in the prison system, if they either refuse to work or need to take time away from work, even for an illness, they are threatened with punishment, losing their good time, and being put back behind the wall if they're at a work release center. Meanwhile, this morning, thousands of Alabamians woke up in prisons, colloquially called work centers, and dressed in normal clothing, reported to their jobs at Burger King, KFC, McDonald's, meat processing plants, and manufacturing plants. One of them could have handed you your morning coffee this morning. Another group of incarcerated workers will be laboring today for the city of Montgomery, wearing hazard vests as they pick up trash along the highway. Some of them work in the very building where we are right now. Those individuals are paid $2 for a full day of work. That is the same rate from 1927. Others are behind high security gates, and they are paid nothing for their labor, and yet they are handed keys and given incredible amount of responsibility throughout the facilities. In fact, they are filling the correctional positions that Commissioner Ham cannot fill. These people are the same ones who are being denied parole, the ones we trust to run and operate the prisons. They are running the healthcare units, they are running the dorms, they are providing maintenance, they are even building the execution chamber that will be used to kill their fellow prisoners. Attorney General Steve Marshall and Parole Chair Lee Guathny will tell the public that there are no nonviolent people who can be safely paroled. They tell us that in order to keep the public safe, they must keep these people locked away. The data shows us that this is simply and unequivocally not true. The Parole Board defies this legislature day in and day out by not following their own standards. In fact, parole applicants who are low risk are less likely to be paroled than medium risk applicants. Why? One has to wonder if it's because those low risk individuals are driving Alabama's economy. If DOC were an $800 million corporation, as Commissioner Ham described it under oath last week, the shareholders would have ousted the entire leadership team years ago. Through this lawsuit, we prove that from the top to the bottom, Alabama's so-called correctional system is devoting itself full-time to coercion and exploitation on top of trapping people in cruel and inhumane conditions with no possible exit ramp. We are asking for you all to come to the table. We will happily open up our records that we have gathered from public documents to show you that this is a clear story of profit over people. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farino. Question from Representative England.
All right, thank you. I don't have enough time in the day to have a conversation about the parole system and what happens as a result of it. But I think there are certain things that need to be kind of reiterated, one of which is something that you pointed out, that the lower the risk you are, the less likely you are to be paroled as compared to individuals that are medium and at high risk, right? They will tell the same person that you are a risk to public safety and then send that same person off site for 8 to 10 to 12 hours a day to work. They will also tell the same person that despite some of those employers coming before the parole board and many others writing letters saying that I would hire this person as soon as they got out, that you are dangerous, right? But you pointed out there was a racial disparity there. Can you imagine what the workforce looks like if the racial disparity that you talk about, and I've seen the numbers, exists? It's primarily black male. And they work alongside people that make double what they make. But it also persists within the system too, because oftentimes those same black males that are denied parole, who are dangerous according to the parole board, they often get the same sort of menial jobs as compared to their white counterparts. Mm-hmm. The system itself appears to be so dependent on exploitation and racism that it could not survive without it. Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. Representative England, when I was preparing my remarks, I had the word racist at the beginning of my speech to describe the parole board, and multiple people told me that that word makes Alabamians uncomfortable and I should take it out. But the numbers don't lie. Black individuals are twice as likely to be denied parole as white individuals. That is what happens when we take away objective standards that this legislature determined was a successful way of figuring out who is safe for release and who is not. The parole board is ignoring their own guidance in over 80% of cases.
Well, and you know, again, I can't, you know, like I said, we could talk about this all day, but I think what's really, what really bothers me is that the Department of Corrections takes 40% of the earnings ostensibly to pay for housing that is unconstitutionally inhumane.
Yeah. Yep.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. And we're not talking about covering the costs of incarceration. We're talking about Alabama profiting to the tune of $500 million based off of this forced labor scheme.
And listen, you know, the way we set this up, I was here in 2019, and when the bill was passed, the parole board has complete and utter discretion, right? So really only a group of people with one common theme, the chair, that's been there since 2019, when you can actually use the numbers and trace it up until this point, has been the common denominator amongst all the issues that we have seen within the department, within the parole board, which plays out in the Department of Corrections. And I think one has to ask the question, as you said, if the least dangerous individuals based upon risk assessments are the ones that are least likely to get parole, either the Department of Corrections doesn't have a clue how to assess people, or there's another purpose.
When you have a chair that says on the record, I am not driven by data, you have a problem.
Yeah. Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Farano.
Mr. Chairman,
Senator Singleton.
before you leave, Ms. Brown,
Farano.
I understand you filed the lawsuit, and that if you would tell us today, based on what you just talked about and expound, what will you see as the remedy if you had to ask this committee for a remedy?
There are a number of things which are outlined in the lawsuit and which will be in forthcoming filings related to the lawsuit. I think I'll hold specifics, but I will say everyone in this room has solutions that we have tried to bring to DOC, that we have tried to bring to the governor's office and the attorney general's office. And we are met with closed doors at every turn. This includes former corrections officers. This includes families who are impacted. This includes researchers who have been in this area for their entire lives. And so the idea that we are trying our best is simply not true. If we are trying our best, why are we 50th? in everything. Or actually in the prisons, we're first in everything, right? We have the highest homicide rate. We have the highest suicide rate. We have the highest overdose rate. We had over 260 deaths this year and last year. We keep outpacing ourselves in violence and cruelty. And this lawsuit will seek to end the profit motive that drives this prison system so that we get back to the mission of rehabilitation. These people are going to be our neighbors. Do we want people to come out at the other end 10 times worse than they went in? Because that's exactly what's happening right now.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Okay, up now is Kevin Hyatt. Up next will be Michaela Martin. So Michaela Martin. Okay, I see you. Okay, Mr. Hyatt, Kevin Hyatt.
Yes, sir. I'm going to let y'all know what brought me up to this podium this morning. 2 months ago, my nephew, Lewis Christopher Latham, was beat to death in Ventress. He was beat to death. It's a reoccurring theme that you keep hearing. The inmate who did it, of course, I'm not going to write their name. He was classified as a level 5 security. He was in an open dormitory. He has a release date of 9/9/99. He had no business, and this is what I've talked to a lot of other people who have the same problem. The classification system that the ADOC uses, I don't know where they got it from. I don't know if they opened up excuse me for being sarcastic, a box of Cracker Jack, because they're just sticking inmates wherever there's an open bed. We got the call 4 days after my nephew was beat to death that he's in the hospital. He was life-flighted out of Ventress. And when we get to the hospital, he's hooked up to machines. Doctor comes in, gives us the prognosis of he's brain dead. And over for what? Christopher was in there for a robbery. He got a 21-year sentence for that robbery. He had already done 18 years on it. We had to elect to take him off life support, which you know what happens next, guys. But the purpose of this place today, other than just hearing us tell our stories, guys, you got to do something about what's going on inside. None of y'all, all of y'all seem like very intelligent individuals. You have data, you have emails, you have pictures. There's no wonder you got a shortage of correctional officers. Who would want to work in an environment where if I go to work today, I could be that statistic? You have to clean up your house. Not specifically your house, but you have to clean up your house, or you're not going to attract. You're building a $1.4 billion new prison. How in the world are you going to equip it with personnel if you can't retain personnel that you got now? It looks like good money after bad, but please, please, y'all got to tell the classification system, uphold it. You cannot put aggressive, non-getting out of the prison system inmates in an open dormitory situation where there's inmates that has a chance. Christopher had gotten his GED. He had gotten clean. And he was getting ready. He was going to learn a trade and come out and go to work with me. Thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Mr. Hyatt. Thank you, sir. Michaela Martin. And up next will be Allison Molman. Okay, thank you. Michaela Martin, go ahead.
My name is actually Michaela Mount. That's my mom's last name.
Mount?
Mount.
Okay.
My father's name is Christopher Mount. In 2020, he went out for parole for the second time and was denied. His mental health declined, which led him to the situation that got him killed. He was put into a suicide unit at Easterling Correctional with another man on a Thursday who voiced to the COs, hey, you need to get him out of here before I kill him. And they thought it was funny. They didn't do anything about it. that Sunday, which was Mother's Day, he was snoring. Guy didn't like it, told him to hush. My dad replied with something kind of smart, to which the guy proceeded to stomp on my father, beat him to death, and then strangled him. Mind you, they were locked in the cell, and the guy's previous charge and what he was in there for was strangulation and murder. We weren't notified for 2 days after my father was killed. I didn't get to see my father for 10 years because I'm pretty young. The correctional system is not a great place for someone my age to be, from experience. And, you know, when you see your dad for the first time in 10 years and half of his face is almost gone because he was beaten, you know, it does something to you. And my father had served more than half of his sentence. He had a 30-year sentence. And he was killed. He could have gotten out. The parole, I've also forgot to mention that there was also supposed to be a CO watching them at all times, and they didn't. A CO actually walked by the cell after my dad was on the ground, laughed, and walked away. And my dad it took them 13 minutes to get back to him. He was already dead. But the thing is that they're putting these men in a locked cell together, and which, first of all, putting them in a suicide unit together, if you're not supposed to kill yourself, how are you going to kill someone else? So they're not supposed to be together. And I just think that the COs are corrupt. A lot of people talked about how these are our dads, these are our sons. I ask you to put yourself in the position to where if you have a son, daughter, anything like that, if you could think and imagine of hearing that they got brutally murdered after not being able to see them. I'm 17. My dad will never get to see me graduate, never get to see me get married, never get to see me graduate college, have kids, anything. That was taken from me. That was taken from my mother. The COs are corrupt. The prisons are corrupt, and it's in the name. It's a correctional, and they're meant for correction. It's not a death sentence. It's not supposed to be a death sentence, and it is. So many people are dying for no reason, and it's a correctional. I'm not naive. I know that people can change, and I know that people treat prison like, hey, I'm going to be the biggest, baddest guy here, and I'm going to kill a bunch of people. But some people do change, and it's meant for correction, and these officers aren't helping. The prisoners aren't helping. And I think that, I mean, I understand that it's hard to employ these people, but they are corrupt, and they are killing our families. So.
Thank you, Ms. Mount. Okay, next is Allison Molman. And then following her is Rebecca Crafton. Is Rebecca Crafton here? Are you Ms. Crafton?
I'm speaking on behalf of Ms. Crafton. She's too emotional.
Okay. All right, Ms. Allison Molman.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
My name is Allison Molman, and I'm the interim legal director at the ACLU of Alabama. Our organization has historically spoken on behalf of incarcerated people, but as this committee is aware, prison safety is also about workplace safety. So I stand before you today because the Department of Corrections plans to use nitrogen at an execution scheduled for January 25th is a lethal threat to the staff at Holman and the public and must be stopped. In January 2021, a leak allowed nitrogen gas to fill a freezer room at a poultry plant in Gainesville, Georgia. The first 3 workers who walked into the freezer room immediately fell to the ground, suffocated, and died. Additional workers entered the freezer room, and 2 more workers fell to the ground, immediately suffocated, and died. A 6th worker died when they were pronounced dead at the hospital. And after 130 workers had to be evacuated, an additional 13 people, including 4 first responders in safety gear, required hospitalization and intensive care. The tragedy in Georgia is no outlier. Every year, the United States Chemical Safety Board has cited an average of 8 deaths and 5 serious injuries from nitrogen exposure. And what all of those other organizations and workplaces have by way of oversight, the Department of Corrections has none. In fact, there is no regulatory agency, OSHA isn't doing it, no regulatory agency is overseeing the use and storage of nitrogen at Holman Correctional Facility. History, science, and common sense tell us that we have a ticking time bomb at one of our prisons. The question isn't if nitrogen gas is going to kill ADOC staff, the question is when. But we still have time to prevent this tragedy. And that's why today we're urging state leaders, I understand that you're limited in what you can do outside of legislative session, but we're urging you to look at what's possible and what tragedies we have in front of us and to do something about it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, ma'am, on behalf of Rebecca Crafton, if you will, state your name for us.
My name is Kelly Helton, and I'm speaking on behalf of Rebecca Crafton, whose son was brutally beaten November 6th.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if Barbara Ann Turner would come to the front, I'm sorry.
That's
okay. Miss Hilton, if you would, just go.
And we found out through not the prison, we found out through a fellow inmate that he was taken out of the prison by ambulance for 24 agonizing hours. You guys asked, did we contact the Department of Corrections? We did. We contacted the warden, the assistant warden, the chaplain, the Alabama Department of Corrections for 24 agonizing hours. Every 15 minutes, we were calling someone with no word on whether he was alive or whether he was dead. No word at all. When the warden finally decided to return a phone call, it was almost 24 hours later, and the answer that was given was, well, he's alive. Nothing else, nothing more, just that he was alive. And if he wasn't, the chaplain would have been calling her. He has had several brain surgeries. He's not being able to see out of an eye. He's having seizures because of his beating. But more importantly, the doctor at the hospital, at UAB Hospital, said that he needed intensive rehab. They put him right back into the same prison that he was beaten in. He did not stay in the infirmary. To this day, he still has not gotten any PT, any psychological help, nothing. The first time that Ms. Crafton got to talk to her son, it was like talking to a 2-year-old. And she still has no answers as of today. This is wrong. Ms. Crafton is his emergency contact. There's no reason that she should have not been notified of the condition of her son, the severity of her son's injuries. And for the warden to always be in a meeting or unavailable or whatever, that's wrong. It is her responsibility to care for the inmates in her care. And it's not happening. Alabama Departments of Correction did not help us get any information. They gave us one more person to call. No matter who we called, the answer was always the same. Only the warden can tell you. Only the warden. Well, that's no good when you can't get the warden on the phone. And then when she does call you back, she only calls you back because you've raised such a stink everywhere that you could possibly raise it. She's very defensive, very cold, and very short to the point. He's alive. Where is that okay? I implore you to think of your sons. If that was the answer after you knew he was taken out of hospital and severely beaten, would that be okay with you? Because I promise you it would not. It would not. There's rules for a reason. I implore you to look. Go to these prisons unannounced, because when you show up announced, they lock away what they don't want you to see, and they only let you see what they want you to see. Go unannounced. See what's happening. It's not okay. We treat these people like they do not matter. Well, I'm here to tell you they do matter. They matter to us, and they should matter to you as well. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hilton. Okay, up next is Barbara Ann Turner. And then following Ms. Turner is Kelly Helton.
I'm also here on behalf of Clifton Adam Bond.
Okay, hold on one second. You are who?
Barbara Ann Turner.
Okay. And is Miss Kelly Helton? Okay. All righty, Ms. Turner, if you will go ahead.
As she was stating to you the circumstances around Adam, I was the one that received a call from a prisoner at 6 p.m. saying that he had been beaten and south-flighted out of there. I was the one that contacted his mother to tell her that a prisoner had called me and said that he was south-flighted, he was beaten with a pipe, he was stabbed all over his body. At that time, as again we called the prison.
Which facility was this?
Donaldson Correctional.
Okay, thank you.
I called the prison every hour that night. Please do a welfare check. Tell me something. Is it true? How do I know it's true? And they was call the warden, as she was telling you. The next morning at 8 o'clock, me and his mother were taking turns calling the warden in a meeting down the hall, And it was like 3:30 that evening. I'd been up 24 hours. I call a state senator, anybody that would talk to me and tell him this is unacceptable. We don't know if he's alive, if he's dead, if it's true. And the warden won't speak to us and no one there. They're rude to us. They're hateful to us. So finally a senator got through to the prison, and she called me back and told me that someone from that prison would contact us, and they didn't give her a call back because that was unacceptable. I believe that was Senator Sewell's office. From there on, it was a nightmare for the next 12 to 13 days. We could only receive reports from the warden herself, and again, every day, she was in a meeting down the hall, unavailable. There was, in the reports that she gave, the first reports is that he was beaten, he was stabbed. She didn't tell us with the lead pipe. And it was just basic, like it wasn't nothing. It may have been nothing to her, but it was everything to us. The next update, 5 o'clock the next evening, she let it slip that he had brain surgery. She did not mean to tell us that. She let it slip. And now by the end, we're panicking. Brain surgery. We want to get to him. She would not allow us. She would not tell us what hospital he was at. She wouldn't tell us anything further than that. Every day goes on for 12 to 13 days. We're calling her. We're getting passed the buck to this one, to that one, to the nurse. And nobody, we were not allowed to talk to the medical doctors that was treating him. We were not allowed to talk to a nurse. We were not allowed to visit him at the hospital. We begged the warden, just please let us see him. We were not allowed to. We had no rights because he belonged to the state of Alabama. He may have done some things wrong, and he was there to serve his time. We understand that. But he did not deserve to be beaten with a lead pipe in his head, stabbed all over his body. And we as family, we should have rights. He may belong to the state of Alabama, but he also belongs to us. There needs something to be implemented with family rights. More than I want to say, I have a nephew, another nephew, Adam's my nephew. I have another nephew that I'm very proud of, as I am proud of Adam too, because he's a great guy. He serves in the U.S. Army, Special Forces. He goes in the third world countries. He'll call and say, hey, I'm going to be in touch with you for a little while. We got to go on a mission. I can't tell you about it. I worry more about the one in the Alabama State Penitentiary than I do in a third world country. because he's got brothers beside him. He's got somebody that's going to look over his back. In these prisons, Adam didn't have anybody look over his back. He didn't have a brother that was trained with him. He didn't have a guard to help him. The guards are not there. This is not the first time. They would not allow me to bring the pictures in for y'all to see of him beaten, even before this incident, how many times he's been beaten in there, and the guards are there. The problem is in the whole system. New prisons ain't gonna stop what happened to Adam. It's not. The same thing's gonna happen in your new prisons. Is something's gotta be reformed with these wardens, with the prison systems, with the guards. And you know, we're from South Alabama. We went through a whole lot of trauma with this. And he is just right down the road from us. Right now, right down the road. We're still not allowed to see him. This is heartbreaking. And if somebody's kid doesn't do something wrong and go to one of these places, they need to thank God. Get on their hands and knees and thank God. Because it could happen to anybody's child. Rich, poor, no matter who you are. And you don't want to be treated the way our family was treated and what has happened to Adam.
Thank you, Ms. Turner. Okay, next up is Ms. Kelly Helton, and then Latasha Williams. Is Latasha Williams here? Okay, Ms. Williams, if you will, come ahead and come to the front and just sit on the front row. There's several seats here on your left.
Again, I thank you for your time today.
Ms. Helton.
My name is Kelly Helton, and as you hear, I have loved ones that are incarcerated or have been incarcerated in the state of Alabama. And I implore you all to ask yourself this question. As you hear these family members speaking today of the violence going on in there, I ask you to think, where are the guards while this is happening? There's a young man that was held captive for 3 days and repeatedly raped. So my question is, when they did cell count, nobody noticed this inmate missing? Where are the guards? What are they doing? They're either looking the other way or they just don't care. And I need you to ask yourself that. Where are the people that we are paying to go into these prisons and protect and serve? Because they're not doing either. It is heartbreaking that we as Alabama citizens, when our loved ones go into an Alabama prison, we pray every day that they do not come out in a body bag, because that's what's happening repeatedly. No one's looking. No one's listening. Your hands are not tied like ours are. Hear us. Hear what we're saying. Heed it. It's true. If you doubt it, just look. It's everywhere. It's not hidden anymore, yet it's getting ignored. We have the lowest parole rate ever. We're overcrowding our prisons, so we're putting all these people, 3 people to a 1-man cell, and we're telling them, no matter how good you do while you're here, it's not gonna matter. You're gonna do day for day. We're putting them in a situation that there's no hope for them, none. And when you put that many people in a position that there's no hope, you have to ask yourself, what do you think is gonna happen? Especially when the people in charge are not looking, are not paying attention. Ask yourself how many deaths have been in Alabama prisons just this year. It's over 400. That's crazy. That is a question that needs to be addressed, and it needs to be addressed right now, not tomorrow, not a week from now, but right now. Our family members are not safe, not even close to being safe. And we're treating them worse than we treat the animals that are in the Humane Society in the state of Alabama. And that is wrong. They are somebody's loved one. I'm asking you to look at this prison system. Look at it hard. Go unannounced. See what really is happening. Better yet, don't announce yourself when you call a prison and ask to speak to the warden. Don't announce who you are, just ask to speak to the warden and see how hard it is for you to speak to a warden. And then put yourself in these family members' places that you're trying to get information about your loved one, and you're getting met with that kind of resistance. It's not okay, guys. We need to do something, and it needs to be done today. Alabama has the worst prison system in the United States. And I don't know about you, but I vote for the state of Alabama. And that's not how I want Alabama to be remembered. That's not. Please do something. Listen to these families. Put yourself in these families' shoes. And remember, these people that they're speaking about are our loved ones, and they do matter.
Thank you, Ms.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ms. Latasha Williams, and then next up will be Tarina Jordy. Tarina Jordy. Okay. Next would be Beth Shelburne. Okay. All right, Ms. Williams.
As he stated, my name is Latasha Williams, and my son is currently incarcerated at Limestone Correctional Facility. The issue, well, he's had everything happen to him but be killed. Standing up here before you just reminds me of going before the parole board, because they sit there, they listen to you. Some of them even smile, and then they deny you. And it's just the emotions that they go through because they have to in order to say that they've done the job of going before parole. My son was raped in February of this year, and it took them over a month to get him moved. I contacted everybody from...
Can you state the facility he was in?
He was at Donaldson Correctional Facility when he was raped, and they moved him to Bullock. I contacted the prison, I contacted the senator, I contacted the ACLU, and I had some help from Miss Allison here. And once he got moved, he was at Bullock for maybe a few weeks, and then some of the inmates that raped him were there at the prison. So he has spent a lot of time fighting and defending himself, but he's only gonna get written up for defending himself, and then that will have an effect on him when he comes up for parole again. He was also at Fountain in 2020. He was working for a warden named Mary Cook. He was painting for her, and he had a knife on him. He says he's not gonna be in any institution without a knife because he has to defend himself on a daily. The knife fell out of his pocket, and he ran to get rid of the knife, and Mary Cook, the warden, asked him, what did he have? So he said he'd rather get written up for the disciplinary of just being disobedient than to get caught with the knife. But she wrote him up and charged him with an assault on her, and he never did touch her. I reached out to Mary Cook and I wrote her a letter, and it probably wasn't even 2 months later, she quit the job. So when he went up for parole and they told me I had the 3 minutes to speak, I said I want to speak on the assault that he was charged with, because when I called to speak to the warden at Donaldson where he was sent after that, they told me, they said he brushed past Miss Cook. So I said that's detrimental to his parole hearing. You know, he's gonna be denied. So when he comes up for parole and I speak to the lady who describes how the process is gonna go through the parole board, she says, I wanna speak to you in the back. She said, I want you to be careful what you say about Mary Cook, because I'm not sure of her name, but the female on the parole board, she said, that's her best friend. So be careful what you say, because it's going to look bad for your son. So people are telling me these things about people who are in high positions who have control over your loved one, which is my son in the case, or anybody else getting out, and they're putting hits. You have officers putting hits out on him. He's had a hit put out on him for $100. These people are from the city that we're from. I had to close my business because they threatened me, because they know I make cash money, and they know where I live, because it's just that small and people talk. So you have these things flowing outside of the prison that have affected my lifestyle, my job, and my business, and it's affecting my son. No matter where he goes, they make the phone calls to wherever he's at to let them know he's there so they can start the extortion and assaulting him again. He's been stabbed over 60 times, and 35 of those were probably from October of last year up until now. He's had his ear severed. He's had his finger severed. He has been sewed up by inmates because he cannot get to the infirmary. I told him that he had asthma when he first went into the prison because they wanted to know all the medical issues. During the shutdown that started in October of last year, he had to pay somebody for a breathing treatment that had access to a nebulizer every time he needed a breathing treatment. So I'm paying $25 per breathing treatment. Sometimes they would let him get 3 for $50, but it's like, why should I have to pay? If the state of Alabama is in charge of his health, why should I have to pay somebody else outside? They have PlayStations, they have chainsaws, they have every weapon, lethal weapon inside of these prisons. The pictures are on social media. They're exposing all this stuff and still nothing is being done about it. I'm frustrated and I'm fed up.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. We appreciate you being here. Representative England.
I'm going to, because I want to make sure we understand that everybody hears this. Have you spoken with anybody at the Department of Corrections about what's going on with your son?
Yes, I have.
Can you describe the response that you've gotten from them?
They don't really care if he doesn't give a name, but if he tells anybody any names, he's putting himself in harm's way.
So what have they done?
They didn't move him. He stayed at Bullock until he was recently transferred because he got into it with an inmate and he defended himself. So now he's at Limestone in close custody.
As far as, and you mentioned about his health issues.
Mm-hmm.
Can you describe the Department of Corrections response to the health issues that he has?
They didn't, he said he was never able to get to the infirmary because there was so much insurrection going on during the time of the shutdown, but he ended up being hospitalized for pneumonia. It got that bad.
And I don't want you to identify where he is, but how many facilities has he been in to this point?
Oh, God. At least 6 to 7 because a few of them he's been to more than once.
And he's never been able to escape the violence and lack of supervision, lack of employees, lack of order or anything, or
No.
You've never been able to escape it.
No, and he says he can't tell. It's like he can't tell certain people because they're in with the inmates. They're all an organization. It's an inside organization.
And inside organization also meaning the COs, correction?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And last thing, you described your experience before the parole board. So one of the employees actually pulled you aside and told you that the likelihood, if you mention this person's name, the likelihood that you would even get a fair hearing won't happen.
Right.
Yeah. And you said you had how long before the parole board?
3 minutes.
And any questions asked of you?
Well, they only want to know a home plan. So I described my home plan, but the time went by so fast. I did ask for an additional I asked for additional time to speak on the subject of the warden and my son, and they just listened to me, but they also had him not showing up for court and a warrant out for his arrest, and he's already incarcerated, so he was in their care.
Yeah. I'm assuming he was denied.
Yes.
How long was he set off?
He has a 20-year sentence for an armed robbery.
So 5 years?
No priors. He was 17 at the time. He had a co-defendant, and he actually didn't. He took marijuana from the victims, but they stated that he took money. I had a reporter contact me, and she asked me what my son did, and I told her, and she said, I thought it was odd because there's no amount of money down on record that he took from these people. He admitted to what he did, but there was no investigation. It's not like this works like Law and Order. Nobody's going in to question what's going on with the people who are actually making the accusations. He's just charged because he's black, for one thing, but he didn't have a chance for youthful offender. It was his first offense, and he has a 20-year sentence, and he has to be around other violent criminals who have life. He doesn't have a problem with doing his time. He just needs to do his time and not be assaulted and have a chance for rehabilitation, to take the classes he needs, to get the medical attention he needs. That's what we're asking for, fair treatment.
Thank you.
Watch what God will do.
Thank you, Ms. Williams. Beth Shelburne, and then after Ms. Shelburne is Edward Friend. Edward Friend. Sorry, okay, thank you. Ms. Shelburne.
Good afternoon to all of you.
Good afternoon.
My name is Beth Shelburne. I'm a journalist and writer, and I've been covering the crisis that's going on inside our prison system for well over a decade now. I recognize that we're all getting a chance to speak because of the efforts made to increase transparency when it comes to the Department of Corrections with the recent bill that was passed, but transparency is still a major issue inside ADOC. When someone dies under unusual circumstances inside an Alabama prison, like a murder or an overdose or a suicide, which sadly, as we've heard, are not really that unusual anymore, the agency used to issue a press release with all of the information about the death that was available to all of the media. That's how it went in 2012 when I began reporting on ADOC. I worked for WBRC in Birmingham at the time. Now, when someone dies in custody under these circumstances, and reporters like me reach out to the Public Information Office in the central office of ADOC, we may or may not get a response. And as you've heard, it's not just people like me and the other members of the media that are here that may or may not get a response. Sometimes the next of kin of the deceased get no response. They are met with contempt and silence. So I know from my reporting that when a person dies in the custody of law enforcement, and that includes a prison, ADOC is the largest law enforcement agency in our state. That information about that death is in the public interest, and it is public information. It falls under Alabama's open records law. So why is this information being treated like a state secret? Why is the agency not answering questions from myself and other members of the media and from family members that want to know if their son is alive or dead? I know that the agency is releasing some information about death investigations in the quarterly reports that it's required by law now to submit to you all and to put on its website. But you may have noticed that information is not synthesized. It is raw material, missing some key information, and it's really hard to get an idea of the bigger picture in looking at these quarterly reports because of the way that they're putting the information out as just raw information. I write about these issues and study them all the time, and it's hard for me to make sense of. So I can imagine, ordinary citizens that don't look at this stuff all day would have a hard time making sense of it. I really question whether or not it is being put out in an intentionally confusing way. This information is important. Why? Because it belongs to the public. It's not a state secret. And our prisons have the highest mortality rate in the nation. We have record homicides and suicides and an epidemic of fatal overdoses. People are overdosing on illegal substances inside maximum security prisons run by the largest law enforcement agency in the state. Just think about that for a second. It shouldn't just be a given that drugs are in prison. We shouldn't just accept that. At the very least, this agency should be forced to develop a protocol to inform family members about the deaths of their loved ones in a timely way and the next steps after that, instead of being met with silence or hostility. This is really unacceptable and shameful. The bare minimum, they should be forced to develop a protocol. That does not cost $1 billion to build a new mega prison, and it certainly doesn't cost $20 million in legal services. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Shelburne. Okay, next we have Mr. Edward Friend. Following Mr. Friend is Christina Horvat. Christina, okay. Mr. Friend.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for being on this committee, you and your colleagues. I cannot imagine a more challenging assignment. This has been maybe the most heart-wrenching 90 minutes that I have spent. I first became aware of prisons back in the problems of the prisons back in 1976. And as you know, that year, Judge Frank Johnson issued an order describing the just horrid, unconstitutional violations in our prisons. It was a nightmarish litany of Eighth Amendment violations, assaults, sexual abuses, overcrowding, understaffing. He placed the system under federal supervision for 13 years, and he appointed a committee to oversee and monitor the state's implementation of his order. My father was a member of that 1976 committee. Dad was a toughened veteran of World War II. He witnessed unspeakable horror. He landed at Normandy, and he was shocked to the core with the pervasive cruelty and violence in Alabama prisons. Let's fast forward 48 years. I feel it's 1976 again, but worse. I mean, listening to these statements today, and I cannot match their eloquence, the prisons are a moral outrage. The newspaper headlines are screaming with us about atrocities, inmate assaults up 41% in 1 year. And I heard one speaker say that our homicide rate is 5 times the national average. It is shocking, and I'm shocked to the core, and my friends and colleagues are shocked to the core, that the Department of Justice, based on a mountain of evidence, declares that corrections are, quote, deliberately indifference to the violence and the suffering that permeates our prisons. Some 30 years ago, and I'm by far your oldest speaker, some 30 years ago, I was chairman of the Birmingham Area Chamber of Commerce. And I'm removed from business now, but making the rounds, I hear with some frequency from my business colleagues that they believe things in the prisons are totally out of fiscal control. They can't understand why this legislature, cannot pass a second look piece of legislation to for these prisoners that have languished in our prisons for 20, 30, 40 years and who did not commit a violent crime, why in the world can't you remand those prisoners to a trial judge, have him re-examine those sentences with the option to go ahead and reduce it or not? That's not being soft on crime, that's being smart on crime. There are two things that I wanted to talk about. I prepared some really detailed testimony. I urge you in the strongest of terms to save money for your constituents. We're paying $1 billion for a 4-year contract to put in jail some people who are on dialysis, who are walking around with canes, who are in wheelchairs. Let's let Medicare or other sources pick up the tab and not put that on the back of the Alabama taxpayers. I urge you to act with urgency. It's been 4 years since Judge Lyons called for us to act immediately. Second thing, please take a look at the Texas experience. And I'm going to email you my testimony, which is way too lengthy.
Yeah, please do.
Texas, as I'm sure you know, turned to community alternatives. They took nonviolent people, and what do? They created substance abuse beds outside of the prison system. They created reentry houses. They had an increase in substance abuse within the prisons, and did it work? In 10 years, crime goes down 26%. 26%, and they saved $2 billion. That's fiscal conservatism, which we simply don't have in the prison system in the state of Alabama.
Thank you, Mr. Friend.
All I can say, thank you. We Alabamian people, we're much better than that, and we very much look forward to you acting in the next session of our legislature.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being here today. Next speaker is Christina Horvat. Horvat, okay. And then after Ms. Horvat will be Deborah Jackson. Okay, Ms. Horvat.
My name is Christina Horvat. I am a representative from both sides of the wall organization. I also have a loved one incarcerated. My husband was stabbed at Staten Correctional Facility last year. And I had this whole planned speech, of course, but everybody's already covered everything, so you guys know what's going on. But our issue is how much more do we have to push it before ADOC has all these rights and the power, but they don't have any responsibilities. They want all of our loved ones to be held accountable, but nobody holds them accountable for it at all. They're not here for us to hold them accountable. The cell phones, we're aware they're contraband, but without these cell phones, we wouldn't be aware of half the stuff that's going on inside these walls. And they're not concerned with what's going on behind the walls. They're concerned to go send a CERT team to go raid the whole dorm because a cell phone video got leaked. So you're in there assaulting incarcerated people. You're in there moving all their stuff. People are just ransacking everything because you want to find who put that video out there instead of finding out where the problem was to begin with. So ADOC always wants somebody else to take the blame for everything. It's time that they took the blame and their responsibility. Your incentive good time was taken away because of an ADOC mistake. How is it responsible when they messed up on someone else's record? You let somebody out of prison before they were ready to come out of prison. They were at work release. They escaped work release. Therefore, that person should have been taken off of the list for any incentive good time. But instead, you cancel the whole state's incentive good time. You are breeding anger. Parole board needs an oversight committee as well. Just as everybody always has somebody above them to hold them responsible, hold them accountable. We, the people of Alabama, have got to make a change, and that is why so many of us have decided to take on political roles ourselves, because we're sick of it. We're sick of the corruption. We're sick of not being answered. And I love the fact, I would love for you to get on the phone right now, on speaker, call any facility in any ADOC facility and ask for a warden. You have 3 wardens at a facility, and you can't get one of them on the phone. You get 1, 2, or 3. They're always busy. They're always out. And matter of fact, as you go to visit, they can walk through any single metal detector. They're never checked. Your guards are never checked. They're getting caught because they're getting told on. Everybody in these facilities have to be held accountable. Everybody. And the money's there according to everybody else. The money's being put in the wrong places. Hire outside people to investigate. Hire outside people to do security for your inmates, the guards, and everybody that comes in and out of those doors. And like y'all said, work release. Y'all have no problem. Let them work state houses and doing yard work for the mansion outside and doing everything. And they're around society every day. But yet, they're a risk for getting out. It's a lot. It angers us all, and we're tired of it. And we are begging you, we're asking you, and everybody in this room can agree. How much more is it going to take before something is done right now before one of y'all's family members are in there or they're dead? Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Horvat.